With less than 9 months until the Centennial, there's little to show for the epic party plan except for a stack of bills from consultants. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone joins me with what went wrong and where we might go from here. Angela, tell us what happened. The celebration was supposed to be everyday events for an entire year, but of course, as we know, that's not going to happen now. You got an exclusive interview with some of the board members from the BPCI or the Balboa Park Centennial Inc. What did they tell you about what went wrong?
Well, Peggy, they basically describe, 3 years of a kind of Murphy's Law situation. They were tasked with putting on this huge event, $30 to $50 million event that would bring in all kinds of tourists. And they ran into all these roadblocks along the way. They went through 3 CEOs, they couldn't find the money, they said donors weren't interested, and they blamed quite a bit on turmoil at City Hall, specifically on former Mayor Bob Filner's administration. So when they came into KPBS to do the interview, they basically apologized for not pulling it off, and we have an excerpt from that interview.
And it just seems, Angela, as though everything that could have happened in 2.5 years happened. From 4 mayoral administrations to one administration that was very disruptive, not only for us, but for the entire community. It was almost toxic then. And for us to be trying to plan a year-long centennial for a park that we absolutely loved and see it start to go downhill. I can't tell you how frustrating and disappointing that is, and painful it was for all of us.
And I think somebody here needs to say, we apologize to San Diegans. This is not what any of us planned. I mean, we all came to this. We were all invited by different people to get involved. And Ben and I especially want to apologize because we could not feel worse about having this not work. It was certainly not the outcome we wanted. All of us worked very hard, and we kept thinking, one more phone call, one more meeting, something would turn that tide, and that big sponsor, and it wasn't just one big sponsor, because quite frankly, we needed 4 or 5 fairly major sponsors to be assured that we could start production this month, and that's really where we needed to be, and we did not get there.
Okay, so the apology is nice to hear, but the board spent $2.6 million of taxpayer money, and they disbanded this month. What do they have to show for that money?
Not much, actually. They spent a lot of the money on consultants. And for example, there was a company that they hired from LA called Autonomy, an event production company. And they worked on coming up with a theme and actually producing the event. Well, the committee fired them after 8 months. They paid them just over $450,000 and then fired them. And then they had to hire another consultant group to take on that charge. So they spent a lot of time on the idea phase. They spent a lot of time not raising the money that they needed to match those ideas, so that was a problem. And they didn't start fundraising until after Labor Day of 2013. So here's what they had to say about where that $2.6 to $3 million, there are lots of different reports around that, but here's what they have to say about where that money went.
Let me first start off by assuring all your audience that money's accounted for. The money was all put into a financial report which we issued last week. So from the time we were first started till the end of January, we put all those financial reports on our website. We also listed the consultants because, quite frankly, if you look at that budget breakdown, the way we had chosen to operate was we really only had 2 employees, and then we had consultants that came in, and the major money was, of course, into that program planning, because that was really what we needed to come up with, was to figure out how we took all the community input and came up with a program that made sense for Balboa Park and was going to be this extravagant, wonderful year-long celebration. But go ahead.
And you can understand, though, that folks at home looking at the amount of money that went out that you paid to consultants, they would be surprised, likely, and especially since there's not much in place to show for it.
Well, I would say we were charged very clearly the city as a client wanted a world-class event, something that could draw people from all over the world, all over the nation, and we were tasked with planning such an event. And it's similar to if a client came to you and said, we want you to build a palace, you would design a palace, it would be expensive to design, and if at the end though they said, we have funding for a cottage, most of what you've done doesn't really apply. But that work is necessary because you have to be able to go to funders. If you're going to try to sell a sponsorship to a corporation, you have to be able to show them what this thing looks like, and the planning is necessary in the front end. Had this succeeded, obviously $3 million, 2.8 in the context of a 30 or 40 or $50 million event is not a significant number.
Now, Angela, in addition to this very in-depth interview that you did, you talked to a lot of people who were on the outside looking in on this process, particularly people like those who run museums in Balboa Park.
Yeah, the folks that run the museums in Balboa Park, I spoke with a number of them, and they really, many of them felt left out of the planning process. They describe a group that was the committee as secretive and pretty guarded, and they say the committee took this stance of, you go ahead and plan your thing, do your exhibits, and we've got the celebration, we'll do our thing. And so this event was taking place on their institutional doorsteps for an entire year, and they weren't a part of the planning, and there was some frustration around that. But they went ahead and started planning their own exhibits and events, and now that's what we have, is the kind of skeleton for what will happen in 2015. And I spoke with, for example, Jim Kidrick, who runs the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and asked him what he would want to see from the planning now. The city has taken over the planning at this point, and I asked him, what would you want to see? And he basically said, I don't want to see the same mistakes. Here's what he had to say. This is Jim Kidrick.
I want to see a more inclusive environment, okay, provided to those leaders that can make things happen. Because it's not about politics anymore. It's easy for people to stand up in front of a microphone and say, well, you know what I think? Well, guess what? I know what you think, and I got to get back to work.
Angela, what happens next?
Well, the planning for the overall celebration has been turned over to the city, and Mayor Faulkner's Special Events Office will produce it now. And as viewers would have heard earlier on the program, he's going to work with City Council President Todd Gloria to come up with a better idea and plan for the celebration. And of course, the museums have already got their plans in the works, so they have that as a skeleton to work from. So there will be some kind of celebration in 2015, and we'll all be looking forward to see what that is.
See exactly what that is. KPBS culture reporter Angela Caron, thanks so much.
Thanks.